I quit drinking 6 years ago. Here's a little bit of my story. If you watched my previous video where I quit drinking for 5 years, I took you on a journey of my path to that point. Here's a few more of the details that paint a little bit better picture of that story. It's important to realize that my plan on day 366 was to start drinking again. And along the way, I started to find out that I had a drinking problem myself. Because in the first 6 months, while things got a little bit better, emotionally, I also started to fall apart around the 6-month point, realizing that I was using alcohol as a crutch, realizing that I was using alcohol to stop me from feeling bad and to ignore the pent-up feelings that I didn't want to rectify. And so at the end of the first year, I realized that I had some other addiction demons, that specifically being cocaine, where I quit. And so people were often asking me, how could you possibly be doing cocaine while you were still drinking? And the answer to that is that I never planned on quitting drinking. I planned on starting again. Although I realized I had bigger problems, and so it was an incremental step. Addiction is not linear, neither is healing. And so it might seem like a strange pattern where it's like I quit drinking first and then I quit doing hard drugs, but I would have never gotten to the latter had I not started with alcohol. Over the last 6 years, I've learned a few things about myself. Most importantly, I started to ask myself the question, why did you start drinking in the first place? And more importantly, why did I do any type of substance in the first place? And what that brought me back to was a place where I was probably 9 or 10 years old, and I drank for the first time, not necessarily by choice. I was kind of forced into it. Why? Well, to fit in and to belong with the group of people that I was with, to belong with the other kids, to belong with the older group of kids that I was with. And so I adopted a behavior that arguably was to survive, to be able to fit in, to feel like I was safe enough and that I belonged. And the reality of it is that I never felt like I belonged, and so it was easier for me to pick up the behaviors of the others around me in order to make it seem like I belonged. And so along the way, I realized that I was feeling undeserving, and that piece of not belonging caused me to pick up substance. And that started with alcohol, and then it continued with every other substance that I picked up along the way. One of the other things that I found out about myself is that, well, I was an addict. And while the addict just wanted to belong, I also had to make friends with that person. I had to make friends with that personality in me, that person that was ashamed, that person that didn't think they belonged, that person that didn't think they fit in. And I had to own that in order to be able to stop the addiction. And then specifically become friends with that person. And that was probably one of the hardest things that I did, because I had to realize that it was never going away. It was a part of me. It was fundamentally who I was. And so it wasn't a matter of just taking a part of me and throwing it in the garbage. It was actually taking that part of me and creating a new relationship with it and having a better understanding of what those behaviors are in order to be able to correct them. And so while I initially dealt with the addict around substance, I had to realize that it was my behaviors that were addict-like. And once I started to realize who that person was, well, I began to have a different relationship with them, and then slowly started to build a new relationship with them and really try to help this little kid in me understand that I did belong and that I did have something to share. And that I deserve to be here. Along the way, after quitting, it just seems like everything should just get better. And what I found was that, well, I was originally living a lie, and that alcohol specifically and substance abuse in general allowed me to live that lie a little bit easier. I could basically buffalo myself, and it was also easier for me to blame other people when I was using substance. It was hard to see that I was making the choices that were causing ill effects on my life. And so it was interesting to see how how alcohol and drugs in particular were causing me to live the lie, was making it easier for me to focus and project my problems onto other people. And then once I quit, I started to realize that I was creating all those problems. And so, yeah, there was a big emotional up where it was like, okay, let's get off the substance. But then the emotional downs were recognizing that I had caused all of my own problems previously, and that the only way life was going to get better was for me to take on those problems head on and solve them for myself and quit blaming others for the problems that I created. So just in the last year, maybe the biggest thing that's come to light is this whole idea that the work never ends, and that the day I quit drinking was the day the work actually started. And now here I am 6 years later, and the work is not easier, it's actually more difficult. With that being said, it's far more rewarding. It's far more motivating. It has so much more meaning. And that's the piece of it that keeps me going. It's being able to see that life is better. I have much more solid relationships. I have consistency in my life, like in all of my relationships, in my sleep, the relationship I have with myself, the relationship I have with my work, it's all far more consistent. The emotional ups and downs, they've plateaued. And again, the work just continues to become more difficult. With that being said, it's so much more welcome today because that work is specifically getting me what I want out of life. And arguably that is the piece that the drugs and alcohol took from me, is they took my time, they took my energy, and they showed me how to waste it and then blame other people for it. And all because I wasn't doing the things that I wanted to do for myself. Looking back on my path and realizing that, one, it's not linear. It's been like an Etch-a-Sketch. It's been all over the place. And I think it's important for people to understand that it took me 3 times in my life to quit for it to stick. And I went back to it because I thought I had it under control. And I also would see people who had it under control, and I thought I could be them. And so I would recommend to try not to compare yourself to somebody else where you're living a different life. I would also remind folks to be as gentle on themselves as possible. You're going to make mistakes, and most importantly, when you make mistakes, when you trip and fall, is to own them. And when I say own them, meaning be accountable and let your friends know that you've screwed up. Because when you have social accountability, well, generally social stress is a good thing for us because it helps us behave in certain ways. And when we surround ourselves with people that promote our good behaviors, well, we'll change our behaviors more readily. And so be gentle on yourself. Recognize that the path is not linear, and that it's a different path for everybody, so it doesn't look the same. I think we focus on the outcome of, I'm going to be completely free of all substance, and that's a really difficult place to start from. I can go on for quite some time about all the benefits that you could potentially find about quitting drinking. But the reality of it is that until you do it for yourself, you'll never know what that outcome is. We're all different. We all live different lives. And we all have different reasons for using substance. And so, as I like to remind folks, if you haven't tried it, well, you haven't experienced it yet. So, if that's the case, what are you waiting for? Give it a try.